It is the Final Word Cricket podcast. Adam Collins and Daniel Norcross from Tooting in Daniel's sitting room. We've just watched the Matildas and the Lionesses go at it in the World Cup semi-final with England winning 3-1. You're still sat in your pyjama trousers despite the fact that it's 2:05 in the afternoon. Jeff's away this week on holiday. I'm back from Greece. We've got a lot to get through today.
We have, haven't we? Yeah. Commiserations to Australia for that Matildas loss. Because I think genuinely it would have been better for the tournament if Australia had won. And I'm going to miss the final anyway because I have done the most... look, it felt like a good idea at the time, all right? So I only had 6 games in the 100. We'll come on to talk about that.
We will.
Only 6 games in the diary. And so I said yes to commentating the 4 Metrobank one-day cup matches that Surrey will have at home, 2 at the Oval, 2 in Guildford. And it's been quite interesting, quite informative.
You've had Metrobank fever.
I've had Metrobank fever, and it's a curious illness. You really feel it around 3:30 in the afternoon as singles are just being taken to long on. But you feel great at 5:45. And anyway, the final game in Surrey's losing campaign, they are slightly hampered by having 13 players out to the 100 and most of their coaches, takes place at 11 o'clock at Guildford. On Sunday, when England are in the World Cup final.
What will the attendance for that Metrobank game be like?
I'll be fascinated actually because the first game at Guildford, which is on Thursday, which will be around the time you're listening to this, is sold out. And actually, there have been serious attendances. Yep. The Oval's had 5,000-6,000. Lots of members have turned up, I think, because of furious rage with the 100. But that's another matter. We'll talk about that.
We will. We were there last night, indeed, watching. You were commentating on. It's actually the first time I've been to a 100 game, and I mean, I might have caught a little bit here and there, but actually watched a game. I wouldn't say I was watching it with fierce dedication. It was my birthday after all. We were having a couple of drinks up there on the Wisdom balcony, but the rhythm of it was interesting. I found the scoreboard difficult to follow, and I think that's because the trained eye, if you've watched a lot of cricket, you know what the cues you're looking for in a scoreboard. And I anticipated having 2 numbers on there. I think when the planning for the 100 began, they said in stadium it would be, balls left and runs to get, and everything else would be strewn or put on a secondary scoreboard. This was so busy that I found myself going, hang on a minute, where are we actually up to in the game? Because they were trying to do an awful lot on that.
It's
board.
really hard. When you're commentating, it's really hard. And the other thing that's really hard is that in the ground, when there's a replay, they devote all the scoreboard to the replay. So you can't see the score.
So no reference.
And on the TV, the score goes because they're showing the replay. So you find yourself in this horribly difficult place as a radio commentator when you're not quite sure what the score is, which you have to update all the time. As you know, in white ball cricket, runs get scored, you have to update the whole time. So that's tricky. And in the second innings, it's particularly hard because you've got, as you know, the target's coming down. That's the main thing. So you end up in your brain as a commentator subtracting the runs required from the initial target in order to find the total. Because actually totals are quite important. And this is something the organisers haven't got their head around because the total is contextual, isn't it? So if they need 120 off 60 balls, that's all well and good. That sounds like it's a hard job, yeah? Mm-hmm. But if they've scored 80 in their first 40 balls, then they're on track, right?
Sure.
So you need that score in order to be able to understand the context of how the chase is going.
And the other thing is the way our brains are hardwired. At one stage last night, I can't remember the exact scenario, but it was at a point where my head went, that's 12s, I need to go at 12s. When of course they're not going at 12s because the balls aren't 6, well the overs rather aren't 6 balls.
That's right. Now that drove Stephen Finn mad because you can't get any clarity across platforms over what an economy rate is. So people are starting to talk economy rates in terms of runs per ball, but this is nonsense. So you then have, is it runs per 5 ball, not an over, and it's not a set. It's per 5 balls because we're not allowed to use a word for over. You can't even substitute set for it, really. You're not supposed to.
Oh, has that been jettisoned, the set?
Well, no, people use it, but our advice or our request from our overlords is not to say set of 5.
Because it was so controversial when it came in, presumably.
I guess, and also because they're just trying to link, it's every ball counts, you see.
Okay.
So they're just trying to link the concept of balls and runs, and they don't want it subdivided. the fact is that cricket requires it to be subdivided, otherwise chaos would take place and someone could bowl one ball and then someone else could bowl another. So there has to be a sequence of balls that get bowled, but insanely we're not allowed really to say it's an over. So you're then kind of calculating, you're looking at that and going, right, so they scored 8 runs off those 5 balls, so that's like 1.6 runs per ball. So if I times that by 6, they went at 9.6 in that over.
But cricket people understand what that means, right? And I understand that it's not necessarily pitched. People like you and I. And I always remember a conversation I had with James Sutherland well before I was working in journalism. I was playing a game against his son, and I knew James a little bit from my former life and was talking to him in the clubhouse. And I made some dismissive comment about the fledgling Big Bash League at the time. And he goes, mate, I don't care. It's not for you. I don't care what you think. And I do think to an extent I've got to remember that all the time. So last night, mentioned it was my birthday, brought the girls along with me. And Winnie was enamoured with the fire. Like you can't understand that. It's, and I know a 3.5-year-old isn't necessarily the target audience either, because they're not quite at the point of maturity where they understand what's happening in the 22 yards in the middle. But nevertheless, there are other bits to the experience for non-cricket people or people who are trying to get into the game. So I'm sort of aware of that. Winnie's gone on a bit of a run here. So we were in Corfu last week on our holiday. And she took an enormous amount of pleasure in watching the ballet dancers in the presentations each night, who she referred to as the strong ladies. She loved watching the strong ladies, which I thought was quite a nice way of putting it. So she talked yesterday again about wanting to watch strong ladies when the cricket was on. Do you know?
Isn't that
nice? She doesn't know. Another thing she said to me was, do the boys play as well? I'm like, how good is that?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
The way her brain at 3.5 years wide is that she's seen bits of cricket with me, of course, but her first instinct was, I'm here watching women or girls play.
Well, she's been to Fairbreak, hasn't she?
She's been to Fairbreak.
So that's and Alex.
And Alex.
Wouldn't it have been lovely if Welsh Fire were playing? Because we know how Winnie has a bit of a crush on Alex.
You could say that. She talks about it every single day. So even though it's been maybe a month or so since they last saw each other.
Well, they'll be on telly. Get to see Alex on telly. That'll be fun.
That's been one of the nice things about... I didn't expect to have a long conversation about the 100 off the top, but here we are. We saw Matt Critchley do well. We sat on this very sofa last April and interviewed Matt Critchley and declared in the final word zone. We failed to ever interview him again, which is on us. But when he left Derbyshire, moved to Essex, we thought this guy who whacks it and bowls quite promising leg spin could be a future England cricketer. Well, he nearly won the game from nowhere last night.
Well, he should have done as well, had it not been for the most eye-wateringly brilliant piece of fielding. And it was a crazy end to the game. And ultimately, cricket works to get people involved, doesn't it? Yep. If the spectacle is great. And the spectacle yesterday couldn't have been any better. You had 16 needed off 3, wasn't it?
Yep.
And he went 6, so it was down to 10. Then, I can't remember, was it?
He had 4, I reckon.
Yeah, something like that. They needed 8 off 2. So they needed 14. Then 14 off 3. He hit a 6. They needed 8 off 2. He whacks this ball out the deep, high in the air.
Long boundary as well, about 90
long
metres.
Boundary, over towards the gas holder.
Yep.
And it's 6 all the way until Ross Whiteley, who is a genuine jobbing English pro. He's been around. He's a fine player, but he's been around a few counties and dived.
A journeyman.
A journeyman. And the journey he took to that ball was something else. He ran as fast as he possibly could and then dived full length in the air, clawed it back from behind the boundary to mean that he saved 4 of those 6 runs. They got back for a second. Needed 6 off the last ball. Critchley gets a really full ball from Curran, drives it down the ground. It's heading towards the long off boundary. It stopped, but in his disappointment that he didn't get the 6 he really wanted, and he did a great cameo. He got 30 odd in 12 balls, so he didn't bother running back because the game's over, isn't it? The game's over, and they've lost by 4 runs, and he's disappointed. Well, blow me if the same thing has happened in the T20 Blast finals day last year with Nathan Ellis, for which I was also on commentary. And it's the most annoying thing in the world, right? Because when you've just had this fantastic game and then you do the end and it's, they couldn't quite get over the line, the Invincibles stay top, they're 4 points clear of the 5 teams in second place on 5 points. For the Spirit, well, it's going to be difficult to qualify. oh,
klaxon goes off.
Hang on.
I
and this was so long, right? This was stewards had come out.
Well, not only the stewards,
Cameras.
but the TV cameras that come onto the ground, they were about to start their post-match interviews.
That's right.
So I don't know who the third umpire was last night upstairs, but
It took a long time, and it was clearly a no ball.
and took a long time upon bringing it was a long time to decide he was going to check it, I guess. And they throw it up on the big screen. A lot of toggling back and forth. Sam Curran had overstepped. No ball was signalled, and suddenly back on the field.
Now they need 3 to win because it's 2 runs for a no ball in England.
Right.
For reasons I don't know.
But the thing is, had they ran 2, it would have been Critchley on strike. It was Dawson instead.
It would have been 2 needed, and it would have been Critchley on strike. Instead, it was Chris Wood.
Oh, Chris Wood, sorry.
Who's a left arm seamer. He's not a batter, and so Curran has to come charging in again. Now defending 3, not defending 6. Bowls the perfect Yorker, castles him, but none of us are quite sure. So you're doing that, and the Oval Invincibles have probably won, but we don't know.
We had that happen
and Curran's pointing at the umpire. Did you see him?
Yeah,
He's pointing at the umpire. Yeah.
Am I all good?
Yes.
We had a test match end that way in Nagpur earlier this year. I was on comms for it when Jadeja took the final wicket, and they celebrate as they do, only for it to be called retrospectively a no ball. So you give it the big ones. You really load up, and the souffle does not rise twice on those types of.
It does. The second time you do it, it's just you're so deflated.
Some other bits and bobs from the 100 while we've started here. I was going to do this later, but as I said, we're here now. It's a pretty big adjustment for you and a few of the colleagues, and presumably some of the players too, moving into 100 ball cricket from the excitement of the Ashes. It's as though the Ashes built momentum for the 100, not the other way around, which is the design.
Well, actually, I think it didn't work for that reason for the first week, because a lot of the commentators were in a place of exhaustion, emotional exhaustion as much as anything else, because that Ashes series ended so bizarrely and controversially. We're still still talking about the ball 2 weeks later. So you go straight into this thing which you're trying to get pumped for. Because it is about entertainment and it's about trying to bring in new crowds and what have you. And also, I don't think the public were ready for it, because you need time to digest. And I think this is actually a problem that's bedeviling cricket generally, and it bedeviled the Ashes, in part because there was a World Test Championship and an Island Test. Those tests needed to breathe. I think they need to not have back-to-back tests with the Ashes. If you have 5 matches, I think you have a week off between each one would be my preferred way of doing it. Or even if it's just 6 days, but just for the narratives to breathe, and then to go straight from the Oval. And that game finished late, as you remember. I mean, it went deep into the 5th day. And the very next day, the whole jamboree, and you saw so many of the commentators. Stuart Broad, for heaven's sake, was at the 100 first game. Jimmy Anderson's there, Isha Guha, Ebony Rain for Brent, all the people that have been working on it. I got 1 day off, got to do the second day of the 100, but I don't think we were quite ready, and indeed the cricket watching public, for that massive gear change, and they needed like a sort of 3 or 4 day transition, I think.
And they've gotten lucky in a way that the second week of the tournament, as far as I can tell, has included a lot of sort of high profile, close finishes, but also high profile players doing well. So Nat Siver making a brisk 80 odd with a flurry of sixes at the end.
4 consecutive sixes pumped into the grandstand at Lord's.
Tammy Beaumont making a century for the Welsh Fire a couple of days ago.
First woman to get 100, and the highest score by anyone in the 100, beating Will Smead's 100.
And that's of interest too, because Tammy's not been in the England T20 sides over the since the Commonwealth Games. I think it was when she was dropped before that.
It's a big statement. And it was kind of, people have been talking about it a lot,
Yep.
about where she was missing. And, she's a huge player. She's a captain for the Welsh Fire and scoring ridiculous runs.
Staying with Wales, Shabnam Ismail taking a hat-trick to finish a close game. The South African superstar, who was very recently retired from the national team at 34, which we talked about on the pod at the time. I think, Daniel, we both knew she was going to retire when speaking to her at Fairbreak, and there's a lot going on there in the South African dressing room, which we've had those discussions. I don't plan on revisiting it today, but nevertheless, using that platform to reinforce that she's still one of the best in the world.
Well, that's where their money comes from. If you're a South African player, you're playing in these tournaments. And 4 needed to win. I think it was Southern Brave. They were cruising. Bryony Smith, who's had a really good 100, actually, was smashing it to all parts. 4 to win, 3 balls to go. Shabnam Ismail hat-trick. Not a bad way to end a game of cricket. I mean, that was... And again, that's what I mean. Whatever you think about the format, the way it sucked life out of the whole of English domestic summer, its success stands and falls by the moments it creates, and that's just box office moment.
And the other side is that Shaheen Sharifredi's taken a wicket with his first ball twice, 2 in 2, I think, in his first game. Also for the Welsh Fire. So
him and Harris Ralph, David Payne, they've got... The Welsh Fire used to be a joke. And one of the things that kept and sustained my interest in the 100 was that the Welsh Fire men's and women's teams had only won 2 games to the start of the season, and those are the 2 times that Johnny Bairstow was playing. The Welsh Fire lost every game, the women, and then lost the games outside that. They were a shambolic wreck of a team, and now they're probably favourites.
Well, with my Welsh blood, now I've thought here, a bit of a tangent. I saw Felix White last night. He was there at the Invincibles game for he is the co-chairman with Greg James. They've been put into these roles presumably due to the success of their podcast. I reckon, the Welsh Fire, perhaps a lower profile team compared to the Oval Invincibles.
You could be a co-chairman.
They should make us the chair. I'd happily take on that role. I'm sure, well, Jeff may not be quite so keen, but you and I can do it.
I could do it. Yeah, I had an aunt, Aunt Myfanwy and an uncle Gomez, so I can do Welsh.
I've done
no trouble at all.
I've done the, what do you call it, the Australian Institute Company Directors course many years ago. We can do this.
You'd have to run me through the meetings and the sheafs of paper, but I can nod.
Yeah, anyway, Welsh Fire, a lot of... and also, we mentioned Alex Hartley before. Great to see her bowling again. Took her mental health break about 2 months ago, I reckon, when playing in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy. Decided to come back for the 100, and we're obviously both close friends with her, so take an interest in her fortunes. But nice to see her enjoying her cricket again. Yeah,
and her team won again the other day, and she had one of the more difficult tasks. She had to open the bowling against Lizelle Lee, with her side having set. It was the day that Tammy got that 100, a fairly gargantuan target. I can't remember, 180, something like that. And she put new balls tossed to Alex. There you go. Lizelle Lee coming at you. A short, straight boundary. You're bowling left arm spin.
Yeah. That's a difficult bar to clear. On the men's side, Harry Brook making runs. We'll talk a bit about Harry Brook later in the context of the England one-day international squad. Also, room for someone like John Turner, the 22-year-old South African, who's now also in the England limited over squads for the New Zealand series coming up.
I've never seen him live, but there was a rain break. There were many, weren't there? And on TMS, you have to fill for as much as you possibly can. And one of the tasks was to pick, it's a crazy task really, pick the England team for the opening test match of the 2027 Ashes. Not 25-6.
Okay.
Why would we do that? We did 2027.
Okay.
And we ran through a whole bunch of players. Tawanda Muyeye got the nod from me. He played yesterday.
Who didn't get a hit yesterday. We were quite excited to watch him bat at the Oval again.
They got too many runs to the first wicket partnership. They'd lost a quick wicket, we'd have seen him. But he's a sumptuous looking player. Really.
Word on the street is Muyeye's been getting support from the Home Office by the ECB to smooth the way to getting the boxes checked as quickly as possible. So there's no hold-ups. Good. So he'll be eligible for England.
Well,
got a great backstory too.
He's got a great backstory. His mother fleeing political.
I say great backstory. I mean eventful backstory.
Eventful, yeah. So anyway, we'd run through a whole list of players: Jamie Smith, him, and various bowlers. And so my phone just had like 3 or 4 messages on it, and so did I think it was Stefan Schummelt was on with us, something like that. And this name kept cropping up: John Turner. I think, who? John Turner. He's been playing for Hampshire, but only a little bit, not played much first-class cricket because Hampshire's got a really good fast bowling stocks, Abbas, Barker, But I dug out some footage of him in T20 Blast, and he's an Australian-style physique, if you know what I mean, the Hazelwood type guy, broad-shouldered, big guy all round, hits the pitch hard. So there's a lot of love for John Turner out there, and he's going to feature.
Same with Gus Atkinson, who hit the radar at 95
They're looking for pace, aren't they?
And he's in those one-day squads as well, which we'll get to a little bit later in the show. So that's a little potted intro as to where the 100's been at. It's taken longer than I thought, but that's okay. When I'm with you, things often take longer than we think they will.
That's and the thing about the 100 is it's supposed to be shorter. That's the idea.
We're off to Scotland next week, Daniel, as a podcast. I say as a podcast, about 15 or 20 of us are heading up for the Fringe. And we're off to play some cricket, and that's in conjunction with the Lord's Taverners. We'll be doing that on Tuesday. I think I'm right in saying I'm doing a Scotland special one up there for the podcast, and then on Wednesday we're playing a game against. Are they called the Edinburgh Flamingos or something like that? One of our listeners is.
So you're doing a show at the Fringe?
Oh no, sorry, we're doing a program about Scotland, and a lot of the final week community are going up there, and that's all part of our ongoing relationship with the Lord's Taverners. Daniel, you and I have been both involved with them for a long time now, and as we've been saying throughout the year on the show, it isn't a big ask. We're not asking you to to run marathons necessarily, although you can. And we will be back in Edinburgh running the half and full marathon. We've got as many spots I'm told we're going to have as many London Marathon runners next year as we see fit. And that's a pretty difficult thing to obtain. A place in the London Marathon, they're hen's teeth, due to the association with the Final Word and the Tavs. If you want to run the London Marathon, we can help smooth that. Get in sooner rather than later. Wouldn't want to oversubscribe. But the message we're getting loud and clear is they enjoyed the work we did in Edinburgh. We got 20 or so people up for that half marathon and full marathon back in May. So all happening, but you don't have to do that. You can simply sign up to their mailing list. Could not be more straightforward. The link's in the show notes. The Tavs have been doing great things in the cricketing community for over 7 decades. I was scheduled to play a game for them a couple of weeks ago with Andy Caddick, who, when I played against the Tavs last year, I told him to get fucked, as I explained on the show. I did sit next to him at lunch, that didn't come up. I'm playing for them again at Arundel at the Castle on
Friday
against the Duke of Norfolk's 11, which was the
Oh,
traditional
lovely.
opening fixture for an Ashes tour for so many decades, and now I get to play against them.
Have you played at Arundel before?
This will be my debut.
It is a beautiful, beautiful place. And make sure you give yourself time to walk around the boundary and then go and check out the view. There's a little cutaway around. It's this lovely bowl, but they've just let this little glimpsey bit, and you can go through there and you get this wonderful view. It's idyllic. It's sort of one of the things that's wrong with cricket, but it's also one of the many things that's lovely about cricket. It's sort of quintessentially English cricket.
It's about 12 months ago, thinking in birthdays and what you do through a year, where I took up off spin. And as we've taken the field together, and you've seen me bowl a bit, they're coming out pretty well, right? This is more than a work in progress.
It's Appleyardian.
This is more than a work in progress. It's Iverson-esque.
Iverson-esque.
I know Iverson didn't bowl offies, but it's in his 40s that things started getting real for him, and I'm 39
with
now.
the finger.
That's what I was going to say. Speaking of fingers, I am a true spinner now. I've got the calluses on my spinning fingers.
Oh, brilliant.
I've ordered the Moe and Ali gel.
The Manuka honey.
The Manuka honey.
Manuka honey gel.
And that is on the way to my place right now to lather it up before playing it at the Castle in a couple of days. And then 2 games in Edinburgh, a couple of games for the Dream Boys. I'm a very busy boy cricket-wise. But yes, the Lord's Tabs are making a lot of this possible. So support them. And if you really want, you can come and watch us play with the Tabs next Wednesday, and the Tuesday game, I think, is the Final Word game. And we've got the baggy caps made up. Final Word baggy caps. And underneath the badge, we have in Latin, can't stop, won't stop. And the Latin translation was done for me by none other than esteemed historian and academic Peter Frankopan.
How does it pan out in the end?
I haven't got it in front of me, but I wouldn't dare to pronounce it. In fact, maybe you speak a bit of Latin, don't you?
Well, yeah.
Enough that you can do the pronunciation for me. I'll just simply pad for a moment while I bring this up, and you can see it here on my computer screen. What does that say?
Semper ad finem numquam ante.
There you go. Can't stop, won't stop. It's actually a nicer translation than that. When you reverse engineer it, it comes out something like this: always to the end, never before.
Lovely.
Always to the end.
They were very subtle, the Latins, and of course in English they're always spoken in the poshest voice imaginable. But I guess they had kind of Italian accents. Semper numquam ante.
And also, while doing a bit of admin here at the front of the show and talking Tavies, we have our Final Word Oval Dream Boys game coming up on the 22nd of September. It's a Friday afternoon or 4 o'clock start at Dulwich Cricket Club, the one where David Hooks was the pro in 1975 and hit 6 sixes onto the train tracks. You would have played there many times, given your home ground lanes across the road.
Right next to it, yeah. I played at Dulwich a few times. They were in a better division than us, but I played some friendly cricket there. I played some Sundays cricket there.
Yep. So if you want to play, on the 22nd of September, we will probably still have spots in the team. That's being organised by Dan Price, very kindly of him. I'll captain it, but he'll sort it out. So get in touch as soon as you can, and you can get yourself a Final Word baggy cap.
What colour?
Blue, navy blue, and then the sort of gold style of the Final Word badge.
Oh, nice.
So it does look rather spiffy. That's a nice way in to talk about Stephen Finn, who was with us with the Tabs at our live show a couple of weeks ago, which Jeff and I have already revisited how good a night that was. But Steve Finn, great guest and a great career comes to an end. He retired formally from professional cricket this week at age 34. He played 36 test matches, took 125 wickets, 69 one-day internationals, 21 T20 internationals, a career that started all the way back in the summer of 2005 as a 16-year-old strapping lad, and he's made it into a couple of seasons to finish with Sussex. You, of course, make a podcast with Finny, Zero Ducks, given. So you've already done that chat with him, and that's a lovely conversation. But to sum up, the cricketer that Steve Finn has been in your eyes, and the sadness in a way that he won't have that one last day of running in. Jeff and I, in the live show, spoke to him about, do you have dreams at night of one day charging in one last time without any injury? And he said he still does, but that's not to be. His knee got the better of him.
Yeah, it was knee, it was back, it was all of his body really, and we had a pretty emotional pod talking to him about it. But how do I remember him as a player? I think, and this is a really typical cricket fans thing to say, as an unfulfilled talent, and yet he played 126 times for England, took 125 wickets. He was the fastest, most dangerous bowler England had for quite a while. I think he was really badly messed around by a whole load of things that were slightly out of his control. One of them was that he played in an era when the England management very much valued parsimony with the ball. And so you remember in Australia in 2010-11, he was the leading wicket taker in the first 3 games, and then was left out for the last 2. Bresden and Tremlett were playing because he was going at 4 and over, but he was taking wickets every 45 balls. So, under Bazball, he would have been gold dust. They would have hugged him tight. He would have played at every game he could, because they would have said, don't care, you can go at 5 and over for all I care. We just want to get off the park. We just want to take the wickets and be done. In India, in a one-day series, which is a strange memory to have of him, isn't it? But I think it was 2012, November 2012, around that time, England went to a one-day series in India. And at the time, their one-day team was dreadful. It was coming up in that cycle to perhaps their most humiliating World Cup, which was 2015.
Dreadful, you say that, but they become the number 1 ranked side in the world in 2013. So,
True, yeah. There was but you looked around and it didn't make sense.
Right.
The players that were in there weren't... It was Trott, it was Cook, it was Bell, and they were all very, very fine red ball players, but it was a time when the red ball team and the white ball team were very, very similar. And their plans didn't seem to be keeping a pace with the way the rest of the world was going, and as was exposed by the time they got to that World Cup. But he was properly rapid, and he kept England in that one-day series against an India side at home. I think he was doing that in India, bowling regularly over 90 miles an hour. Yeah. In Test cricket, a great spell at Edgbaston in an Ashes, when he took 6 for, which he remembers as basically his happiest, most vivid time on a cricket field. I've asked him about if you could take one pitch with your one set of fans and one moment, that you can still feel bristling through your body. It'd be that. But loads of things happened to him that were out of his control, really. I mean, the Graham Smith incident, knocking the bails off with his right leg, because he is in love with Glenn McGrath. I mean, they were commentating together for TMS, and you should see the way he looks at Glenn. It's like such adoration. It's beautiful. It's like the way Winnie looks at Alex Hartley.
Yes.
It really is. And it's really sweet. And he apparently had posters of Glenn McGrath, and he modelled himself for him, and so he'd get tight to the stumps, and then his right leg usually would just have a little flex, and it was knocking a bail off, and Graham Smith enforced a law change, which messed with Finney. He talks about it really well, actually, more than it should do, because all he actually had to do was get ever so slightly not into the stumps, but it
was the timing of it, right? So when we had this conversation in the live show, it wasn't so much that it had happened, it was when it was happening. I was living here in 2012, and the way that Finn's return to the ranks was seen as at last, our most prized asset is bowling as quick as he's ever bowled. He's frightening, he's in rhythm, and he's the number 1, I remember we returned for that test match. I can't remember which one it was exactly, but a test match against South Africa. And it was at last, Steve Finn, he's here, he's good to go. We're going to get, 7 or 8 years of high quality fast bowling out of this guy. And in the middle of all of that is when he has the drama with South Africa, the overnight decision from the MCC to change the laws and make it a no ball. I had one of them the other day, by the way, when I hurt my spinning finger. It was, I had my right leg hit the stumps, and everyone went, Steve Finn, Finny, rah, rah. And that was the day before he retired. Anyway.
Well, I think there was a Steve Finn no ball yesterday in the 100.
Oh, was there?
Yeah, I think there was.
Nice to have a law named after you. Not many people have that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's 100% over it. If I'm honest with you,
he shouldn't be.
I think he's still angry. But look, I mean, the other thing to remember about Finney is what a great servant he's been to other cricketers as well. He's obsessed with cricket. He's a badger. He talks to them. So he's had 2 seasons at Sussex, and he is very regretful that his body wasn't able to do what he wanted to do for the county. But I'm pretty sure what he's given to that team of young lads, a very, very young team, Sussex, is more valuable even than the wickets he might have taken.
And also a fantastic human being, great broadcaster. So, Stephen, congratulations on your career, and we will surely have more to do with him on the final word over the years. Okay, time for our first break. We've got so much to get through. We've got a whole stack of international retirements. We've got our new segment, The World is Fucked. We've got some Nerd Pledge coming up. England's World Cup squad with Ben Stokes there, Australia A, West Indies, India, some corruption stuff. It's all happening, so stick with us on the final word. Final Word Cricket Podcast, Adam Collins and Daniel Norcross. And the begin segment to it is going to be Nerd Pledge. New pledger, Sam Davies, $10.60. If you're not familiar with what we're doing here, if you're relatively new to the show, people send in pledges to us that are a cricketing number in the currency. So in Sam's case, 10.60, $10.60 in the AUD. And then we tell a story about the history of the game. And you and I are going to combine together on this because my instinct when seeing 10.60 was that it would be figures in an innings. But surprisingly, that has never been taken in the professional game. There have been a couple of 10 for 59s and a 10 for 61, but never a 10 for 60. I had in the back of my mind, wasn't that the collapse Australia had at Cape Town after the sandpaper debacle? Yeah. Didn't they lose all 10 wickets for 60? And that was worse than that. It was 10 for 50 in that final innings after they got off to a reasonable start.
England might have had a very close to 10 for 60 against Bangladesh in the Test match. They lost.
Chittagong.
At Dhaka.
At Dhaka, was it? Yeah.
Okay. They had a really good opening partnership, but I don't think it was quite 10 for 60. 10 for 63 or 4.
That might have been one of Finney's last Test matches, I think.
I think it would have been, yeah.
One of the last handful he played. So it's none of that. However, where we did strike gold is on match figures in a number of ways. Now, the first of those that we can look to is Sam Cooke, who took 10 for 60 in a first-class game.
Against Kent last year, 2022, and it gave every commentator the opportunity to say, it's a wonderful life for Sam Cooke.
He's been... I think in that segment you did on TMS about who might be there in 2027, Sam Cooke is now being talked of in ways that Jamie Porter was a couple of years ago. And I know they're discussed as like a couplet due to the county they play for and sharing the new ball at Chelmsford. But Cooke's had a bumper season, had a 10-wicket game a couple of weeks ago, a match-winning effort. I'm not sure whether he's necessarily overtaken Porter, but he's younger than Porter. And he's a resourceful chap. He has other interests outside of the game. He's a DJ, isn't he, Sam Cooke? I'm pretty sure. He might be in the post-Anderson world. It might be that there is room for someone who does something similar to Jimmy, especially if you can add a yard.
And I think he is a little bit quicker than Jamie Porter. Anybody who plays with him, I mean, Alistair Cook was on our selection panel for that 2027 team.
Right.
But I had him down. He was the first name on my fantasy county cricket team sheet.
Okay.
He was the first name I put down, was Sam Cooke, and then obviously Simon Harmer, because those two just take wickets, as they say, for fun. Only Fred Titmus took wickets for misery. I think he's got it in him. He's also a versatile cricketer. He's won the player of the match in last year's 100 final, which was pretty weird because you don't think of him as a one-day bowler.
Not at all, yeah.
But he's got some lovely varieties. And look, if you think about Dan Worrell, Sam Cooke has the ability to be a kind of slower Dan Worrell in some ways when he plays one-day cricket because he's got a nice bit of movement. He can take it away and he does the wobble back in. He doesn't bowl floaty length, which is crucial for slightly slower English seamers. They can get found out on the harder wickets and tend to be a little bit floaty. It's partly been a problem for Chris Wokes when he goes abroad, isn't it? He's more effective on English pitches. I think Sam Cooke would be more effective on English pitches. And as you say, there is space. England teams don't tend to go in with 4 bowlers or 3 bowlers of pace, partly because they don't produce bowlers of that kind of pace. But even if you think back to the 2005 Ashes, Matthew Hoggard played a role, didn't he, alongside Flintoff, Harmison and Jones, who were quick. So it's pretty natural for England to select a seamer of that order.
Yep. Sam Cooke, change is going to come. Maybe. We'll see.
Hey,
the other 10 for 60, the only time 10 for 60 has been taken in Australia was Mitchell Starc against Tasmania in 2019 at Drummoyne. I think Drummoyne's where Starc also ran rampant against WA and took 2 hat-tricks in the same match. We're going back about 7 or 8 years now or something like that. But
I loved Drummoyne. I did a game there in 2017-18.
Yep.
And it was one of the occasions when I had my most sort of epiphanic realisation that cricket was a game for everyone in Australia and isn't in England, because there's that lovely bit of green that's round the back behind the commentary boxes.
Yep.
And there are boys and girls playing against each other, and it's the most natural thing in the world. But yeah, I can imagine Mitchell Starc on that surface could be quite tasty.
And the one time it's been taken in Test cricket, and you were looking into this in a bit more depth than me, was by Jack Hearn, who was the...
Old Jack Hearn.
Well, there's two Jack Hearns, isn't
That's
there?
the thing.
And they're related. I think we've done this in the past, that they've been... they were related distantly and both played in a similar era. But the Jack Hearn we're referring to, 1896, up the road here at the Oval, when England beat Australia by 66 runs. So the match ran with England all out 145 under the captaincy of W.G. Grace. It was Hugh Trumbull taking 6 for 59 from 40 overs, as he did seemingly in every innings. Then Australia were all out 119, where Jack Hearn in the first innings took 6 for 41. And then England the second time round bowled out for 84. So Australia were only set 111, but they were castled famously for just 44, their lowest score in England. And that was helped along by Tom McKibben making 16. It could have been an awful lot worse. At one point, they were 9 for 25, and they were 8 for 19 before that.
9 for 25, which is, of course, what Australia were against South Africa when they made 47.
That's right. I think it might have been 9 for 23, but you're right, around the same score
around
there.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
And in the second dig, Hearn took 4 for 19, picking up the wickets
But you know,
of Frank Iredale, Joe Darling, George Giffen. These were all bowled, as was the custom. And the last wicket, McKibben, got him for 16 to complete match analysis of 10 for 60. And yes, Jack Hearn had a fairly productive Test career, 12 matches and a bowling average of 22. But more again, you've read about him in the past.
I have. He took over 3,000 wickets. I think it's the most number of wickets by a seamer. Yeah. And of course, magnificently, his first two names are John Thomas, which I presume that means the same thing in Australia as it means in England, does it?
Please continue.
Your John Thomas is
your old boy.
Yeah, your old boy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're John Embry.
You're John Embry, if you like. And it's been called that in England for really quite a long time.
Okay.
So when he was named John Thomas, I'm imagining, he would have got a fair bit of sticker for that when he was a kid. There's a couple more things to note though in that match, because it's an incredible game in which he does this. One of the more remarkable things about it is that the quality of the bowling on show and the players on show. England had Jack Hearn open the bowling. In the second innings, he opened the bowling with Tom Richardson, the great Tom Richardson, who, along with Jack Hearn, the leading seam bowling wicket takers of their age. Richardson bowled 1 over. Opened the bowling 1 over. It was a maiden. That was it. Then he was taken out of the attack. Bobby Peel and Jack Hearn did.
Bobby Peel, the pitch pisser.
The pitch pisser. Exactly. So there's some incredible names in there. Australia got a great team, but England, I mean, it's a roll call of sort of golden age marvel, really. The only thing missing is CB Fry, Grace Jackson, Ranji, Bobby Abel, Archie McLaren, Tom Hayward batting down at 6.
Wow.
And bowling. I mean, it's so bizarre looking at these scorecards, because they only really bowled 2 or 3 bowlers, and they bowl 40 overs each. So
often with the keeper batting at 11 as well.
Exactly. Dick Lilly in this case down at 9. So it's a kind of, everybody can bat, it seems, but hardly anybody can be bothered to bowl.
Okay.
But he was a seamer. So apparently, I think he bowled sort of cutters as well, and because they talk about him getting spin, but he bowled a remarkable 10,000 balls in one season. A dry summer.
Blimey. And when you consider James Anderson's bowled fewer than 40,000 in his whole Test career.
Whole Test career, right.
Yeah.
So 10,000 balls in a summer. And the following summer, which is a wet summer, he bowled 9,000 balls.
So that was the summer of 1896 when he bowled the 10,000 balls. Only Alfred Shaw has done that. So two players have done that in the history of professional cricket. And that's in the same summer where he takes the...
I mean, it's 1,666 ball overs, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a lot of overs. If you play 30 games in the summer, then you're bowling 55 overs per game, something like that.
So he was a Middlesex player all the way through, and yes, he played Test cricket until 1899. So first class 3,061 at 17.7. So he's going pretty well there. He took 5 wickets in an innings 255 times, 10 wickets in a match 66 times, and of course one of those was a Test. So and that was his best figures as well in that first innings, 6 for 41 at Test level. So a very, very useful career, and that's where we'll leave Nerd Pledge here with the great Jack Hearn. and that's a nice place to move on. But thank you, Sam Davies, who's a new pledger. And you can join us, patreon.com/The Final Word. Daniel will be making story time with me this week as well, where we'll deal with about half a dozen numbers, and that'll mean a whole bunch of stories that we'll tell and get into more depth on the weekend show. And then Jeff will be back with me for that the following week as well when he returns from holiday.
Aha!